Welcome to Behind the Charities. Today I'm speaking to Rebecca Cosgriff, Director of Data and Quality Improvement at Cystic Fibrosis Trust. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi there, how are you?
Can you tell us a little bit about Cystic Fibrosis Trust and what your role involves?
Yeah, sure. So the Cystic Fibrosis Trust is the only UK-wide charity catered for people with cystic fibrosis, and we are a medical research charity. So most of the funds that we receive go to supporting research into improving the quality and length of lives of people with cystic fibrosis. And I'm the Director of Data and Quality Improvement, which means I look after the Cystic Fibrosis Registry, as well as our quality improvement team who collect patient-reported experience measures and staffing data from across the whole of the UK.
Can you tell us a little bit about what your typical day might look like?
Yeah, so I think a typical day is an interesting concept in 2020-21, hey, but my days are pretty varied, and that's a fantastic part of my job and working at the Cystic Fibrosis Trust, is that one day I can be working with colleagues from a pharmaceutical company to review a protocol, because we use the data from the Cystic Fibrosis Registry to carefully monitor drug safety. Or I might be speaking to international collaborators on how we can better monitor and understand COVID-19 amongst people with cystic fibrosis. Or I can be working with the quality improvement team to look at comments that people with cystic fibrosis or their carers have made about the quality of the care that they receive in cystic fibrosis centres. So it can be really varied, which means I really appreciate those sparse, regular meetings that I have. Things like my team meetings, which are always lovely opportunities to check in with people who are based from across the country and have different working patterns and are all focusing on different projects. So I really cherish those routine moments.
And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about cystic fibrosis and how it impacts people's lives.
So cystic fibrosis is an inherited genetic condition that affects just over 10,800 people across the whole of the UK. It primarily affects the lungs and the digestive system. So what that means, it can make it really difficult to breathe and to digest food.
And I'd be really interested to hear about, why are you so passionate about working for the Cystic Fibrosis Trust and what brought you to it?
Yeah, so my whole career I've worked with healthcare data. So what initially brought me to the Cystic Fibrosis Trust was the Cystic Fibrosis Registry itself. I felt really lucky to have the opportunity to work with a data set that was full of consenting people with cystic fibrosis, and that actually over 99% of people with cystic fibrosis consent to contribute their data to the Cystic Fibrosis Registry. So that, coupled with the fact that clinical teams have supported this database over 20 years, means that the CF Registry creates huge opportunities to do really exciting things with data, whether it's using machine learning to predict when exacerbations of cystic fibrosis might happen, or to launch the world's first interventional clinical trial that's entirely embedded within a registry that I knew it had huge opportunities in that sense. I didn't have a personal connection to cystic fibrosis, but you don't have to work at the organisation for very long to develop that personal connection. We employ quite a lot of people who have cystic fibrosis themselves, and obviously we are really passionate about making sure we involve people with cystic fibrosis and their families in the work that we do. So you can't really get through a day without speaking to people with cystic fibrosis who you build up a relationship with. So once you're in, you're in. You can't really leave the cystic fibrosis family once you've started.
Well, your passion comes across very clearly there. Could you tell us a bit about the people that you work with and what they're like?
Yeah, so this was actually my first time working for a medical research charity, and I think a medium-sized research charity, which is what the Cystic Fibrosis Trust is a really fantastic opportunity for someone like me to work with people from lots of different disciplines. I think when you work for a university or in a hospital, you can end up a little bit siloed. So for me, that can mean I only get to hang out with the data nerds, and I love a data nerd, I am one, but it's nice to be able to get to hang out with people who work in fundraising, communications, information and support, and even when you can't physically sit next to them in the office every day at the moment, interact on virtually and meet other people and really see the passion for the work that they do and learn about other areas, which is really fantastic. And it's a real privilege to work with people who are based across the whole of the UK from all different kinds of backgrounds, have a passion for their work, but are also really nice to have a cup of tea with. I think that really feels like a win-win.
So what was your first thought when we asked you to do this interview?
It's actually really nice to have the opportunity to speak about why you love your job so much, because I think we can all get really caught up with what your next objective is, what your next deadline is, trying to solve problems and resolve challenges. And sometimes it's really nice to have the opportunity to take a second and think about how amazing it is to get to work in a medical research charity. And also I'll be really interested to see the other videos as they come out, because I think hearing from other people about what they love about working in the charity sector can be really inspiring as well. So yeah, other than thinking I had to put makeup on today for the first time in a while, I was really happy to be invited to do it.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I must say we've interviewed a few people so far, and I just find it nothing but inspiring. So of all the positive work you've done at the Cystic Fibrosis Trust, what are you most proud of?
So there's some projects that are really standout ones to me. I think working with Professor Kevin Southern, who's based at Alder Hey Children's Hospital, to support the launch of a world first, which was a interventional clinical trial entirely embedded within a cystic fibrosis registry. And it was trying to answer a question that, you know, it's not a industry sponsored question. So it's not going to get industry funding, and traditional clinical trials are really expensive. So if we tried to answer this question using a normal RCT, it might have gone unanswered, you know, potentially forever. Whereas because we have this amazing registry platform as a jumping off point, we're able to actually get to answer a really fundamental question about CF care. The study's called CF Start. So if you want to learn more about that, you can, it has its own website that you can look at. But that was a really proud moment for me. But I think the thing that I'm most proud of on an ongoing basis is the data and quality improvement team. I think they are you know, a really diverse bunch of quirky individuals. I definitely count myself amongst that as well. And they just work so hard, and they're so passionate about the work that they do. But it's lovely seeing them interact with one another, because it's kind of like a family atmosphere, where as busy as we are or as stressed out as we might be, if someone needs help or support, the rest of the team will rally around them. So I think although there's some amazing projects that we might do a press release about, ultimately the thing that I'm proudest of is my team.
Oh, that's so lovely. Obviously, the pandemic has had a huge impact on everyone, and I wanted to hear about how it's impacted people with cystic fibrosis and what your charity is doing to address that.
Yeah, so the Cystic Fibrosis Trust is actually in a pretty unique position when it comes to COVID-19 and the global pandemic, because people with cystic fibrosis, because of the risk of cross-infection, were having to worry about deadly viruses before it was kind of globally trendy because of the coronavirus. So people with CF can't meet face-to-face ever because of that risk of cross-infection. So it was really interesting seeing the whole world begin to have to cope with the anxiety that comes with fearing infection, but also the isolation that can come along with it as well. So I think in some ways it's shown the whole world what it, you know, a little bit of what it can be like to live with cystic fibrosis. And as an organisation, I think we adapted really well to the pandemic, because we were already set up to cater for the people with cystic fibrosis who work for us or who come to our offices to be involved in our work, that we were pretty well able to transition to having meetings digitally, being paperless, having laptops that we can use at home like this. So that was all actually fantastic, and I think quite eye-opening for people even who work for the Cystic Fibrosis Trust but, you know, don't have cystic fibrosis, so can't really imagine what that isolation can feel like until suddenly we're all put in the same boat. But obviously it wasn't, you know, all a kind of wonderful transition to remote working and people having their eyes open to what it's like to live with CF, because based on, you know, previous epidemics, we were incredibly concerned back in March 2020 that COVID-19 could be absolutely devastating to people with cystic fibrosis. But again, the sort of silver lining around that need to urgently generate evidence of how COVID-19 might manifest in people with cystic fibrosis was that colleagues from all around the world were willing and able to give up their time for absolutely no additional resource to try and work together, share information and gather that information as quickly as we possibly could. And we've now got a 22 country collaboration working on our 4th publication on COVID-19 in cystic fibrosis. Unfortunately, although there is a risk, particularly for people with cystic fibrosis who are post-transplant or have low lung function at baseline pre-infection, the outcomes for people with CF are not as bad as we initially feared they would be. And just having that information available and knowing that we are monitoring it on an ongoing basis, I think is a really great achievement. And it just shows how well cystic fibrosis professionals do collaborate globally. So there are some silver linings, even though it's been a tricky year for everybody, and particularly people with cystic fibrosis.
Well, I think we'll end on that silver lining. Thank you so much for speaking with us, Becca, and thank you for taking the time.
You're welcome. Thank you.